do you think, this is a broad question, and if I should be asking someone else, let me know. But what do you think of working with a wholesaler? I was given, or emailed a couple leads that Matt Brown had gotten via yourself, and it turned out that both of the individuals were wholesalers. And one of them actually spent quite a bit of time talking with me. I could tell he was really new, in the business. And this was, they had originally, they were probably on realtor.com or something like that. And we're looking at HUD homes. And
Wait, wholesalers, you're talking about a buyer looking for properties.
yes, yeah,
You're
investors.
not talking about a seller selling wholesale property.
No.
Okay, so you're talking about buyers that want the smoking hot deal.
Pretty much, yes. And, apparently that's, their business. And I believe, yeah, it would be, wholesalers, and they're, yeah. So anyways, what are your thoughts on that?
Depends how they're doing their business.
Okay.
They're just a buyer as far as you and I are concerned. I wouldn't give them a title of being wholesale. They're just looking for a smoking hot deal. You are going to put a lot of time and energy into crappy properties, hoping that they come together and you get paid.
All right. I just didn't feel like this would be.
But our market might be changing. I mean, come fourth quarter, if we have foreclosures that look like they could be a possibility on the market, there's going to be some opportunities.
Okay. That's
right now, buyers paying over asking price are not finding opportunities.
That's for sure.
And usually the people that are running that type of idea, company, business, they are not going to sign an exclusive buyer rep with anyone. They're going to say, well, whoever finds me the property, that's who I'll work with on that property.
Okay.
So you're going to have, I don't want to say competition, but you kind of are.
Mm-hmm.
In order to find those properties. And there is an agent that somehow I get on his email list where he buys down and dirty properties. There's a company called, it used to be UGG. We buy ugly houses, but UGG actually sells their leads. And the company that they sell their leads for has a name.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to buy those. We used to turn some of them, but we went after the sellers of the nasty houses. So I have sold my fair share of condemned houses.
Okay. I'm going to have to, he gave me the name of who he's working for or with. And I need to dig that up and find out a little bit more, make sure I'm thinking on this correctly.
But before I spent any time with them at all, I'd want to know how many agents do you work with at a time?
I did ask that.
What was the answer?
Well, I asked if he'd worked with other, Keller Williams agents. So I was a little more specific, and he does. There's someone I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, usually they're willing to work with anyone that can find them what they're looking for.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
It's about HOA, right? If let's say you're listing a house that the property is subject to they have HOA, and you have to list the house. Do you just go, if you have to get the HOA documents to the buyer, do you just go ahead and upload it through MLS, or it has to go through a third party that is through like an escrow to the buyer? How do you do that?
Okay, so condo docs can be delivered to a buyer in several different ways.
Okay.
There's still an association in Burnsville that you have to go pick up the 3-ring binder and
Okay,
you physically drive them to the buyer.
okay,
Then they sign a paper receipt for that same association and you're done. You can always do it that way. Most of them are going through, like Wise Docs is one of the companies. They're going through a document company that just does association docs,
okay,
and you're paying for those docs or the seller's paying for them.
uh-huh.
And they're being delivered to the buyer electronically.
Oh,
If the
okay.
seller is proactive and in this market, I would encourage it.
Uh-huh.
You can have it all on the MLS as supplements.
Okay,
They will be very long and very big.
okay,
As long as you as the agent turn into your file the resale disclosure certificate and a receipt showing that they received everything, you're good.
okay,
As a buyer's agent, make sure that they really received everything.
okay,
I'm seeing receipts signed and I'm asking for the resale disclosure. Oh, no, we never got that. Well, then don't check the box saying you got it.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
Some associations have a master and a subsection or
Mhm.
subdivision.
Okay, this one
And
is it, okay, sorry.
it's like I just did one in Bloomington where it was 2 different companies for the documents.
Okay,
Personally, as an agent, I typically pay for the docs ahead of time and get paid back at closing.
okay,
I take that risk. It is the first time I ever had an $850 risk involved. Usually it's $200-300. I was horrified. And I was very happy, Jeannie, to get my check back.
So, I'm sure the seller will just pay for that, right? So, I don't
Ideally,
have.
the seller pays for it.
Uh-huh.
The reason I typically do it is because then the seller is going to be the one to get the email links and stuff. And
Oh,
not all my sellers are techy enough to know how to get that to me.
oh, okay, okay,
But
okay.
I'll tell you what, instead of paying $850, I would have drove down there to his computer and helped him send it to me.
Oh, okay, okay. So you could do it 2 ways. Either you pay and then you let like a document company take care of it, or you could just get the whole thing and.
No, no, somehow I wasn't clear. You're gonna pay no matter what.
Okay,
The association is going to charge.
okay,
They typically charge maybe $300.
okay,
It can vary a lot.
okay,
They are either going to provide it to you in paper,
okay,
or they are going to direct you to a company that will provide it to you.
oh, okay, okay,
It will always be provided to the listing agent
okay,
or the seller. I'm a
okay,
control freak, so I like it to be the listing agent.
okay,
And then the listing agent has to somehow deliver it to the buyer.
okay.
It can physically be paper delivery.
Mhm.
I have an account with a delivery company, actually.
Okay.
You know, for $35, they'll deliver paper almost anywhere.
What is the name of that account? Is
I think I still have it in my data book as Quicksilver, but I think they're a different name now.
Okay.
I've got a very old account.
Oh, okay, okay.
And then usually they're PDFs, though. Usually you're delivering it electronically. And
Okay.
if you deliver it through the MLS as supplements, that's fine. If you deliver it directly to the listing agent, that's fine. Just make sure you get that receipt back and that you maintain a copy of the resale disclosure certificate.
Okay, okay, okay.
That resale disclosure certificate is 4 to 6 pages. And it answers questions like, who's the insurance company? Are there any lawsuits pending? Are there any assessments coming up?
Okay.
It's kind of, remember the old Reader's Digest where you could read a 500-page book in 15 pages? That's what the resale disclosure certificate is.
Okay, okay,
I dated myself, didn't I?
okay. So as long as you hand it over to the buyer and get a resale disclosure certificate
And
you
a
are fine.
receipt,
And receipt, you are fine.
you are fine.
Okay. So you can just go ahead and upload it on MLS.
Yep, the budget, so when they send the budget over, it's
Uh-huh.
only good for 90 days.
Okay.
So that's why sellers in the past didn't order it until they had an offer.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the market's moving so fast. I'd like to say the buyer gets it like before they write the offer.
Okay.
The
Okay.
10-day right to rescission starts the day they get the documents.
Okay.
So like when you go to DR Horton or Lennar and they give you a little thumb drive,
Uh-huh.
and then they say, we'll schedule the appointment in a few days to
Mhm.
write the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Those 10 days start when you get the documents. They do not start when you sign the contract. So
Okay.
you can have those 10 days ticking down before you write a purchase agreement.
Okay.
So if I was listing something right now and it was going multiple offer, I'd put them all on the MLS and I would
Mhm.
ask that the receipt be part of the offer,
Okay. Okay.
that they've already received them.
Okay.
There is a modification waiver of CIC docs
Mhm.
that you can take the 10 days and bring it down to 3, but you cannot sign it until you've had your 3 days.
Oh, okay.
I keep seeing where agents are sending it over as part of the offer and they haven't even got the docs yet.
Oh, okay.
You can't sign it. You can agree to sign it, but you can't sign it till they've had their 3 days.
Okay. Until 3 days. Okay.
Yeah. And remember, the day of receipt is day 0. The
Okay.
next day is day 1, 2, 3. So it feels like 4 days.
Okay.
Make sense?
Very much.
Very good questions, though. Very good questions.
I have one coming up like that, and I just want to know ahead what to do before it's ready.
Ka, do you have any questions?
I'm just really interested in hearing more about the rent back option.
Okay, I'm gonna hit that next. And I don't know what LC is.
Oh, it's me. I was using my phone. Sorry. I'll take it
Okay,
out.
okay, that's fine.
I
All
was
right,
using my phone before, and I needed
Then-
to answer questions. So I
nope,
just.
that's fine. Give me just a second because you want to get into rent back. So I want to cover rent backs and because they came up in Tuesday's meeting. And I'm afraid that some agents maybe didn't know what they are. So give me a second here. Okay, share screen. There, can everyone see my screen?
It's just black for me. Oh, there it is. Never mind.
Okay. Why do we have 2 of them? Sorry. Okay, so the idea of what a rent back is the buyer closes on a property and agrees to delay possession for a number of days or even months. I am seeing a lot of this in the $500,000 type price range. I'm also seeing it where there's maybe an area that is just insane with the number of offers people are getting. And the way to fill this out is you're going to put the date of the purchase agreement. This can be used the same form as either an addendum or an amendment. Sometimes we go back and add it as an amendment. especially if, like, a good example is interest rates are suddenly going up very quickly and your buyer wants to lock and they can only lock for 30 days to get the best rate. The seller might say, okay, we can close in 30 days, but I can't move in 30 days. That way the buyer would get the benefit of the better interest rate. In the past, that's how I've seen this used. How it's being used right now is I'm seeing the sellers don't have a house yet. They don't know where they're going. They're maybe not closing for another month or two. And the buyer's saying, that's fine. I want to close. I want to know this is going to be my house. And now I'm going to give you time to go do your house shopping or to go close on your house. The big concern here is this usually only works for conventional. Check with your lender, because like FHA, DVA, USDA, they are all owner occupied and they've got a time limit that's usually a very short number of days. We're talking very short, less than a week, where your client has to be able to say they have possession of the home as their primary residence. Most conventional loans, and I say most, please always check with your lender, will let it go to 60 days. So if you did it as an addendum, you would put it in, whoops, that possession would be, let's say, if we were closing, let's just say we were closing today, we'd go out 60 days. And you put what time you're actually going to go in and go out. And here's where it gets confusing. So the buyer literally becomes the landlord. They literally own rental property that they plan on occupying in 60 days, but they literally own rental property. We just went through an eviction moratorium where you could not evict a renter because of COVID. Do you think that possibly some of these sellers overstayed their welcome? Yeah. Also, as a brokerage, we do not manage rental property. Your buyer, who is maybe brand new to owning a house, is now managing their own rental property. If there's going to be a security deposit, it would be collected typically the day of closing. The seller shall deposit whatever dollar amount that is with the buyer, not the title company, not the realtor, not the real estate brokerage, in certified funds. The deposit plus any statutory interest minus all lawful deductions. Remember, they are now a landlord. Security deposits collect interest. Security deposits are in case the dog gets stressed out and eats the carpet. Things happen. Maybe the mover is back into the garage door on their way out. I am telling you real life things that have happened in my transactions. So they happen. So the buyer is now holding $1,000. They have to pay interest and they're allowed to deduct for things that maybe aren't the same. And it shall be returned to the seller. And I don't know what that statute number of days is. I'll be honest, I don't deal with rentals. I don't know. The rent back fee, the seller shall pay the buyer. Here again, let's say it's 2 months. So $2,000, whatever it is, at closing for the right to occupy the property, beginning the day of closing and continuing through that 2-month period, or 30 days, 15 days, whatever you need to have. You can also make this 0. And a reason to make that 0 would be you are now in a multiple offer where you want your offer to look really, really attractive to the seller. They can live in this house for free for 2 months. That is the most common way I am seeing this written. So at closing, the right to occupy the property beginning on the closing date and going through possession date. In the event the seller vacates the property prior to the above possession date, seller is not entitled to any refund unless agreed to in writing. So at the time you write the purchase agreement, they want 60 days. Now they go find the house that they really, really fell in love with and they can move in 30 days. This either has to be amended or the dollar amount does not change. Now, if it's zero, it's zero. But if it was 2,000, 2,000 might be an awful lot to pay for 30 days, depending on the price range. The seller, who is now the renter, agrees to continue to pay the utilities. I would recommend that you also put in things like they agree to cut the grass. They agree to, you know, have ChemLawn come as scheduled, whatever it is that you need to have done for that property. You do not want your clients moving in and having the seller say, oh, we had a garage sale and sold the lawnmower because we're going into a condo. So we didn't have any way to cut the grass for 2 months. You'll get a ticket from the city if you're around here. Insurance. Remember, your buyer is now a landlord. They own the property. If a hailstorm comes, it is their property and their insurance. This is now rental property. It will cost them additional on their insurance to insure rental property. Make sure it's being insured correctly. Require that the seller provide a copy of their renter's policy. You want to make sure that the seller, if a child falls and breaks their leg going down the steps, that they have their own insurance policy for that injury. What's other good examples? You know, if they damage the house, you want to make sure that they've got insurance. If they have a house fire, those things get really messy. So seller is responsible for seller's personal property insurance, and buyer and seller shall provide insurance binders at closing. Both parties provide the insurance binders. Okay. Maintenance. Buyer shall be responsible for all repairs and normal maintenance of the property and personal property covered in the purchase agreement. The refrigerator stops working. This is saying that the buyer, who is now the landlord, has to repair the refrigerator or replace it for their renter. Okay. You can see how this isn't necessarily what everyone wants. Buyer shall keep the property in reasonable care, repair, and order. They're really saying that they will do everything. So here where it says seller agrees to perform the following repairs and maintenance, this is where I would add your lawn care, your snow removal, those things that, you know, you usually do when you own a house. Use of property. During the term of this agreement, seller shall occupy the property as seller's personal residence and not make any changes. They can't start taking down the shelves and saying, oh, I was going to take those with me. Make sure you do a really good final walkthrough, both before the closing and before taking possession. But you as the agent, you're not there when they take possession. They are the landlord. They are doing a walkthrough from their renter. Seller shall not assign or sublease. They can't rent it out after them. Buyer, who is typically now the landlord, is not responsible for anything that would occur from the seller's use, meaning the child who fell down the steps and broke a leg. That's why the seller needs to have insurance. Quiet enjoyment. Your buyer, the new landlord, cannot just show up at the house. Even though they're now making the mortgage payments, they're the landlord. Their renter has the right to quiet enjoyment. They've already been paid the rent. They have no reason to stop at that house. They can't knock on the door and say, hey, my grandma's in town and I want to show it to her. No, your renter has the right to quiet enjoyment. Here's where it gets messy. Termination. If seller fails to leave the property, they don't leave, they don't move out, they stay. Buyer shall provide seller with a 7-day advance written notice to leave the property. Remember, they were going to stay there 60 days. So now on day 53, your buyer has to remind them in writing. Notice is considered given on the date mailed to seller at the above address. Seller shall leave the property in the same condition as at the time of closing if seller fails to leave the property. Buyer is authorized to take any action permitted by law to take possession of the property. Buyer shall be entitled to recover damages from seller for buyer's loss of use in the amount of, here's where you put a dollar amount per day. Say you put $100 a day. Well, first off, we just lived through a whole period where you couldn't evict someone, even if they didn't pay rent. And that's what they talk about. Authorized to take any action permitted by law to take possession of the property. That means eviction. You've got the cost of evicting someone. And now you're saying, but I'll be okay because I'll collect $100 a day. Well, you could have someone that says, I know I said 60 days, but I can't get into my new house for 70 days. So I'll pay you an extra 1,000, but I'm staying. There's not a thing you can do about it. They're staying. And you can't evict them in 10 days. And they're not breaking their contract. They are honoring their contract by agreeing to pay that $100 a day. So you have nothing you can stomp your feet all you want as a landlord, but they have not broke their contract. They can agree to pay that $100 a day or whatever number you put there, beginning with the possession date specified on page 1, in addition to all charges and reimbursements stated in this agreement, reasonable costs for obtaining possession of the property and enforcing the terms, including reasonable attorney's fees. You can go after them for the eviction costs. But if they're just going to extend it a few days, you're out of luck. Just cause notice. The following notice applies only to certain residential properties located in St. Paul. Owner provides and tenant acknowledges. Remember, your client is now a landlord. The following just cause notice is required by the city. The landlord under this lease shall not unilaterally terminate. Remember from real estate classes, unilaterally means one side can cancel a contract. This is a bilateral contract. Both sides have to cancel it. Terminate or attempt to terminate the tenancy of any tenant unless the landlord can prove in court that just cause exists. They have made it harder to evict someone. The reasons for termination of tenancy listed in the City of St. Paul's just cause notice, you can pull up the statute, and no others shall constitute just cause under this provision. So if the seller, who is now the renter, is actually paying their $100 a day, you don't have just cause. And I'm not going to assist you or your client with this post-closing, and you are not going to assist your client with this post-closing. You are going to instruct them to go speak to an attorney. We cannot represent a client post-closing. You do not have a license to do that. You do not have E&O insurance to do that. The brokerage will not stand behind you if something blows up. And I sound like a bitch, I'm sorry. But in real estate, you have a limited license to practice law during the transaction. Once the ink has dried at the closing table, you can no longer represent someone. This is leaving an awful lot on your buyer's plate post-closing.
Then has there been, I mean, I totally get it that, once closing is done, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
But have there been a lot of, many disasters or arrangements like this blow up that you're aware of?
Less of these than there is move-in agreements. That's a different form where the buyer moves in before closing.
Okay,
Usually a seller that has lovingly cared for their home for the past 10 years is going to lovingly care for their home for another 60 days. The not being able to kick them out because of COVID, yes, we've seen that happen. I mean, even, hey, I caught COVID and I'm on quarantine for 14 days and I can't leave. Moving company won't come, we're sick. Yes, we have seen that. I think it's our new reality. So the rent back can be a very powerful tool to getting an offer accepted if you have a seller that doesn't know where they're going to go. But it does leave a lot of vulnerability to your buyer, who now suddenly is a landlord with no experience in being one. Ka, did I cover everything, or do you have any other questions regarding this form?
Well, that's really helpful. With this just cause notice, this is only for the city of St. Paul, correct?
Just the city of St. Paul.
Thank you.
And I am not as familiar with it as I could be because it's not something that I deal with.
Thank you.
You are very welcome. All right. Contingency. This is the other form I wanted to cover, and we had this one blow up pretty bad this week at the office for one of our agents. This is sale of your contingency, that a buyer has to sell a property to buy a property. There are still a lot of older agents like myself that remember this form, so we think we know this form, and I don't have to read it every year. It doesn't change that much. It changed a lot about 3-4 years ago. So here we date the purchase agreement again. We put in the property. And we say what property they have to sell. Every town has a school street, right? And that it will be or currently is listed with our brokerage. Let's say it's going to be listed in 7 days. You have to get photos, you got to get anything else ready. Let's get it going. This says that this house will be listed in 7 days, a final acceptance of the purchase agreement that's been accepted. But the seller has the right to demand the removal of this contingency at any time. To demand the removal of this contingency, seller or licensee representing the seller shall deliver to buyer or licensee representing the buyer written notice demanding removal of this contingency. There is not a form for this. This needs to be something done in writing. It cannot be a phone call. It is something that should be acknowledged on the other side. Personally, I would send an email with a read receipt to the listing or to the listing agent for the house my client's trying to buy and their brokerage. On the MLS and the roster, there is you just click on the person's name and it tells you the email address for their brokerage. It's a couple clicks. I would include the brokerage. You want to have it date stamped that on Tuesday, we demanded the contingency removal. Here's another thing. Agents my age or that have been in as long as me, we used to count hours, not days. So when it says that you're going to, if the seller calls a contingency, the buyer has the right to meet or beat the deadline. So the buyer, to remove this contingency, buyer or licensee representing buyer shall deliver to seller or licensee representing the seller at any time but no later than, let's say, 3 business days. I have seen people put 48 in there, thinking it's 2 days, and really they've just accepted a contingency for 48 days. See how that could make a seller mad. So make sure that the agents are filling this out for business days. It does not include weekends. So if you get served notice on Friday, Friday is day 0. Saturday doesn't count. Sunday doesn't count. Now you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to perform. Perform means you have now sold your client's house with the only contingency being financing. You cannot have it be inspection. You cannot have it be review of CIC docs. Financing is the only thing that removes, that you can still have as a contingency. Okay, but no later than 3 business days of receipt of written notice from seller. So the seller gives you notice. Now you have 3 business days to respond. A true copy of a valid, fully signed purchase agreement for the sale of buyer's property that is not contingent upon anything other than financing, and that has a closing date not later than the closing date of the purchase agreement. So your offer says we're going to close June 30th, and your new offer comes in July 4th. Too bad, so sad. It doesn't remove the contingency. You have to coordinate those days. If buyer enters into a valid purchase agreement for the sale of buyer's property as defined here, buyer shall remove this contingency as specified in this addendum. Buyer shall have until 11:59 p.m., right up until almost midnight, on the final business day referred to on line 15, that's at 3, to remove this contingency. I do see agents cross off the word business and put in the word calendar. I do see agents cross off the 11:59 and put in maybe 6 p.m. because no one wants to stay up till midnight. Usually I don't see people make changes on that part. They just go with how it's written. Closing of buyer's property. If buyer removes this contingency for the sale of buyer's property, this purchase agreement becomes contingent upon successful closing of buyer's property. Remember, on the purchase agreement, there's 3 choices. I have a house I need to sell, I have a house I need to close on, and I don't have a house at all. So it changes it from I have a house I have to sell, it automatically amends it to I have a house I have to close on. If buyer's property does not close on or before the closing date of this purchase agreement is canceled. So make sure when your buyer sells their house that it is talk to the lender. Make sure they know we have to make our closing date. Don't promise something you cannot deliver. Oh, you think you can close in 25 days? Maybe I better go back and see if these sellers can amend and make it 35 days, because we all know 25 days is a dream. And some lenders maybe could do it. Strong enough buyer, who knows? But make sure that you can actually close, because if you do not close on time, this purchase agreement that your clients are buying is canceled. Buyer and seller shall immediately sign cancellation of purchase agreement, confirming said cancellation and directing all earnest money paid here to be refunded to the buyer. Now, could you have a seller that says, hey, I'll give you a couple extra days? Yeah, you guys, your agents, negotiate things out. But know that if you have a seller on the other side who maybe got a higher backup offer, they don't want to negotiate. They're going to take the literal language of this and they are going to be correct. They do not have to be nice. They just have to be correct. The language in this paragraph supersedes any other provision to the contrary in any financing contingency made part of this purchase agreement, if any. In other words, if it's cash, that doesn't apply. Failure to remove contingency. If seller demands removal and buyer does not timely remove this contingency, this purchase agreement is canceled. Buyer and seller shall immediately sign a cancellation of purchase agreement confirming said cancellation and directing all earnest money paid here to be refunded to the buyer. In all of these cases, the buyer gets their earnest money back. The seller cannot say, I am upset and mad and I'm going to keep the earnest money. They get it back, period. You agreed to that. If neither party timely removes this contingency and this purchase agreement does not close on or before the closing date specified, this purchase agreement again is canceled. Everyone signs cancellation and earnest money goes back to the buyer. In the event there is more than one buyer or seller, the parties agree that any one buyer may remove the contingency as specified here, and any one seller may demand removal of the contingency. That's kind of an odd sentence because usually every addendum out there requires all parties to sign. This is more of an acknowledgement. They just need both sides to acknowledge. Some language I like to add, because I kind of go back to how the form used to be written, is that if buyer at buyer's option can prove the ability to close without the sale of their home. I'm kind of winging this because usually I type it out a couple times first. Seller will be provided with proof of funds or approved financing. I also like to add whether I get my 30 days or not, it's a different story. If I can get a week, I'd be happy right now. So I like to add the verbiage, if buyer at buyer's option can prove the ability to close without the sale of their home, seller will be provided with proof of funds or approved financing. Our old form used to give the buyer the option to say, hey, I didn't want to own two houses, but I can. So let's keep going towards closing. And I'm going to keep marketing my house, but this sale is no longer contingent on that. The new form does not give that option. So if you do not write that in there and the seller calls your contingency and you go, oh, but you know, my buyers really can't afford it, too bad. If the seller wants to accept that, they can. But if they've got a better, higher, nicer offer, they can simply tell you no. The only thing that this standard form says removes this contingency is the sale of your home and a purchase agreement. Not that you suddenly have a surplus of money or the ability to finance. So I add that language in. I also personally like to add in, because I figure once I've tipped my client's hand that they have the ability to buy without selling, I know the seller is going to call their contingency maybe the same day. They might be, you know, they might be patient, but they might not be. So I like to put in there that the seller agrees not to call the contingency for a certain number of days. I used to always put 30. Right now, I'd be happy with 7. I am working with a contingent buyer right now that's got one of those, you know, split entries in Blaine. It'll pop in a weekend type thing. But they want to buy without selling so they know they have a place to go. It's kind of a hard position to be in. So I do like to put language in there that the seller will not call the contingency for however many days I can wiggle out of the deal. Any questions on this form? Has anyone used this form?
No.
No, I have not either.
Okay, so you're
But I
going to
think
work.
I will be using one soon.
Okay, so you're going to be working with people who have a house to sell and they want to buy. And
Yes.
that's when you use this form.
Yes.
So if they really would never consider having 2 houses, then don't add any extra language. That's how the form's automatically completed. But there was a house last month I wanted to make an offer on, and I probably could have afforded 2 houses, and it's taken me 2 years to find that one. I should have just done this. Yeah. In that case, the listing agent got COVID and was in the hospital, and by the time I figured out he was back, it was already sold.
Uh-oh.
And so, yeah, it's still out there, guys. So these are just 2 forms that you should have in your knowledge bank as being available. And I wanted to cover them in depth because when you use them the first time, they're a little confusing. And even agents that have been using them for a long time are maybe thinking old school and not thinking how they actually are written now. If there's no other questions, I think we're gonna just cut 10 minutes early, but if anyone's got any more questions or answers, please bring them forward.
I do have one more question
Yeah,
on 2 to, we have 1 to buy but 2 to sell.
yep,
So there's this, they are couples now, but before they were not. And she bought the house. And at that time, the man, that's the husband's credit was not good. So she let the wife, now wife, buy the house.
yep,
And now they are legally married. So when they bought the house, they were not legally married. Now they are legally married. So is it still 2 to sell?
totally,
Okay,
totally. Anytime you're married, it takes both of you.
okay.
And
I was thinking it is, and that's how I kind of drafted it, but I was just kind of making sure because she bought it before they legally got married. So I just
doesn't
wanted to
matter.
kind of double check. Okay.
Yep, and even couples that are legally married, sometimes will just have one spouse buy.
Uh-huh.
Because sometimes one spouse doesn't have good credit, or maybe has too much debt, or maybe has no income, they're a student. So
Okay.
we have just one spouse buy, but when they go to sell, it takes both of them. That's why it's so important on the purchase agreement or the title company that you indicate that someone's married.
Okay.
I just had clients get married in the middle of a transaction.
Yeah.
We're supposed
Yeah,
to close in 2 weeks, and they got married. They did a JP thing last week because with VA, you have to be married to put both spouses on the PA.
Wow.
And so they wanted to add her because they got a better interest rate. I'm guessing she has better credit. And they had to go get married. So all of a sudden I got a phone call on Wednesday. Hey, I know we got married yesterday. And that's okay.
I kind of, that's how I kind of prepared the whole thing, drafted it, but I was just kind of making sure because they got married, legally got married after she bought the house. So I was like, okay, but I added his name to it anyway.
Okay, so you're using a word that my sister owns a title company, and she is always shocked at how many people cannot answer the question, are you married? And it's because we think of a marriage license and a marriage certificate as being married,
Okay.
but not every culture and not every country thinks of it the same.
Yeah, my culture is different too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when she asks, are you married?
Mhm.
She really wants to know what's at the courthouse.
Yes.
However, if you tell her you're married and it's a cultural marriage, she will
Mhm.
put down that you're married.
Okay.
She'll protect that other spouses because it's your interpretation of your status.
Okay.
If you are widowed, you are single. Widowed is not a marital status. If you are divorced, you are single. Divorced is not a marital status.
Len, I just want to make sure I understood that correctly, because in the Hmong culture, we have to be, we can be culturally married or legally married or both. And so I wanted to understand that with the married part, that our
Talk-
clients don't have to be legally married to be considered married.
Talk to your closer.
Okay.
She's not there to officiate a wedding. She is there to see how you want to go into title.
Got it.
Talk to your closer. And like I said, my sister owns a title company, and that's the hardest question she asks at a closing. And I have had clients show up with big ass wedding rings and engagement rings on their hands and then sit there and say, yeah, we're not married. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that might work in the bar scene. What's the ring? But it is, I mean, we've got some friends that they totally had the whole big church wedding ceremony, but they chose not to file the marriage certificates because she's actually a widow and collecting pensions from the first husband, but family needed to see them married. So it's not even, it's not one culture versus another. It's just, there's a lot of different reasons.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Ka, I have been to one Hmong wedding and it was absolutely gorgeous.
Do they offer you beer?
You know, I'll be honest, I don't drink beer, so I wouldn't, the red in the dresses is what just threw me.
Yeah. Lots of drinking. That's
Yeah,
why.
there was a lot of drinking. My son was the best man, and there was
Oh, sweet.
they drank him under the table for 3 days straight.
Yeah.
But it was very beautiful.
That's beautiful.
So, all right, that's all I got. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank
bye.
you. Hey, Jordan, can I get a copy of that if it's ready, the recording?
I will tell her.
Okay, thank you,
All right,
because I just
thank
want to
you.
go over the answers, the questions that I asked and the way you answered. I just want to kind of go over it again.
Well, and that's why I literally went line for line through the forms.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.